Why don't children have any instinct whatsoever to kill animals? If you put a child in a room with a small animal, they would be so happy. They want to play with it. They don't have any instinct to attack it, eat its flesh. It's like just within their being. But I have never seen a kid just like want to kill an animal.
If a dog and a cat don't grow up together, they're pretty aggressive to one another. But if they grow up together, they can be best friends. And so there's something to that. And I'll just leave that at that. I don't think we can search for some sort of utopia where lives are not killed before maybe we would like them to.
I agree, but we should aim to minimize them.
From a spiritual perspective, there's a lot of sacrifices in the Bible. There's a lot of things related to this, but I don't really see a point of, oh, you can't do this. Jesus as a sacrificial lamb is very metaphorical, and I don't think that that's evil. I think it's like a reverence, like oh my gosh, look at what was done so I could live.
The ideal throughout the Bible is kindness and compassion and the golden rule. God gives us dominion, then right in the next passage, he prescribes a plant-based diet to humanity. Clear as day. Do you think there's slaughterhouses in heaven? I think God's highest ideal is us treating all animals with mercy and compassion because we all come from the same source.
Let's say that was true. That would be great, but we know that's not how the world works. Again, I come back to this lens of pragmatism. What are we reasonably able to do in this imperfect world?
All right, y'all. Welcome to the Organic Muscle Podcast. This is our first in-studio one in this beautiful studio. I've got my good friend Chris Bates here, and we have a treat for you in store because we are going to have a friendly debate about animal agriculture and the pros and cons, the benefits, the ethics, the spirituality of an animal-based diet or a plant-based diet. So I actually put out a debate challenge on my Instagram. And I was basically like, hey, if any of my friends want to debate the ethics of animal agriculture, I would love to do it. And lo and behold, the most charismatic, charming, likable, handsome person I know accepts the challenge. So I was hoping it would be some unlikable schmuck so I could just wipe the floor with them. Turns out it's my friend Chris Bates. So Chris, thanks for joining me, man.
Of course, man. Yeah. I don't know if all those nice things are true, but I can tell that you're building me up before you strip me down.
It's a psychological strategy.
It's working so well.
Psychological warfare. Chris is a health coach and also is a dating coach, and he's writing a fantastic book. And look, I'm a dating expert myself, so I know I could separate the wheat from the chaff, and he's the real deal. So, Chris, you want to tell us a little bit about your dating expertise?
Man. I appreciate that sentiment a lot, too. Yeah, I used to work for Paul Saladino, which is why I'm such a big advocate of the animal-based diet. And I know we'll get more into that later. But I started my own business, and I realized that a lot of men care more about their relationships and health as an avenue to becoming the best version of yourself. And that's obviously very pertinent in relationships, especially in the dating world, because in the modern world, we have issues with food and diet, but we also have issues with connection and relationships. So that's basically all I do is talk about maybe the metaphorical diet that men are consuming in the world and how that affects their dating and their relationships. But I have a huge passion for what we're talking about. So I'm honestly honored to be here. I'm stoked to get into it.
Thank you, man. I love how you peel back the layers of the onion in the dating and the nutrition. But what I really like about your message to men is it's not this surface level stuff. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, becoming the man that can truly attract a very beautiful, intelligent woman. In order to attract that, you have to be that. And that's what I love about your message.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, and you nailed it. I think I should hire you for my marketing team.
Please do. And what's the name of the book and when's it coming out?
It's The Dating Edge, and it should be, I don't know when this airs, but it should be late September of 2025.
Awesome. So a lot of you fellas, I know you're on the struggle bus out there, so definitely check it out. So today we're going to be talking about nutrition and health and how animals play into all of this, because all throughout human history, animal agriculture has been central to our survival, to our civilization, to our religions. Everything comes down to our relationship with animals. It's been a central theme throughout history. So today we're going to discuss the pros and cons and the ethics of our relationship with animals. Should we eat them? Should we have a better relationship with them? Can we heal the way we farm them? Is there an ethical way to basically farm animals for our own consumption? So I thought today it would be interesting to start with us steelmanning the other person's position. So as I'm sure you know, straw manning is when you kind of give a false version of what that person believes to make them look bad. But steelmanning is giving an accurate representation. So I can start. In this conversation, if I had to guess, I think your position is going to be that eating meat is a natural and normal part of human history, and that in order for most human beings to thrive optimally in the world today, an animal-based diet is preferable, that a person can most easily get the nutrients that they need from an animal-based diet, and that I'm guessing that you don't think factory farming is the best, but there is a way to humanely treat and farm animals, and that is preferable to factory farming for the flourishing of humanity.
That's a good summary.
Okay, sweet.
Do you want me to comment on it?
Yeah. You could feel free to comment, and then you could give,
I think I should just leave because you just summarized it. So, that encapsulates a good portion of it.
Okay, great.
A good portion, but there are a few outliers I think that we'll uncover.
Awesome.
That'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I'll let you give a full introduction and overview of your beliefs after we do this little steelmanning.
This is a great exercise. I never even heard the term before. I love it. I thought you almost said strong manning for a second. I was like, yes, the best of animal and plant-based proteins collide. Yeah. If I was to steelman your position, and I didn't know that going into this, so I'm going to wing it. Bear with me. I would say that you have an argument that animal nutrition is not essential, and that men and women can live off of plant-based nutrients alone, and that there's an unethical proponent beyond just machine farming or agriculture, that there's a spiritual issue with having to do with souls and living in harmony with the environment, and maybe also there's the environmental piece as civilization moves forward. So again, didn't really think about it too much, but that would be my guess.
That was pretty good. Yeah, I totally put Chris on the spot there, so that was great. Yeah, absolutely. So okay, the reason I did that is because I wanted to establish goodwill. Like we're really trying to actually understand each other. And not trying to in debates all the time, people try and misrepresent the other person's position, and that's lame. So, if we really want to make progress, and by the way, the whole purpose of this debate is to be a tool for everyone listening, to have two friends who love each other, to have an honest discussion, and to show each other compassion and to listen to each other so we could all figure out what the heck we're doing here and how to build a better world. So
may I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Because we were talking before the show, and I think it's really important for people to hear is James and I both understand, because we've gone through our various journeys, which I'm sure we'll get into, that there are very few things we know for certain. And so this is a productive conversation, not only for everyone listening, but for both of us, because as men who would like to say that they practice wisdom, we have our convictions, but we have to be open to thinking about things differently. And so I'm not trying to be cutthroat. He's not going for my jugular. We came to this because we're excited about a productive discussion. And I think whether it's politics or diet or religion or you name your pick nowadays, people are so polarized and dogmatic. And so when I found out what James was doing, I was stoked because I know he's one of a handful of people that would be able to facilitate a fair conversation that would be productive for not only both of us, but everybody listening. So I just want to throw that out there because I think it's good context.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the course of my life, I've really learned that wisdom is being able to entertain ideas you don't necessarily agree with and to run all the calculations and to put yourself in different people's shoes. And, for this discussion today, I just want to say, if you're a meat eater or a vegetarian, whoever is listening, you have my utmost respect if you're able to entertain different people's viewpoints and not get triggered, not get angry. Actually, you might get triggered, but in the overcoming of that emotion, that's where the seed of wisdom is. When I first made this transition to a plant-based diet, I was extremely triggered. it was the most triggering experience of my life because it was like deconstructing my entire identity.
Mm.
But on the other side of that, it bore great fruit for my life. So anyways, before we get into that, all of that, I would love to hear more about your story, your health journey, and how you basically came to your worldview and your beliefs surrounding health and your relationship with animal-based dieting.
So in the beginning, when I popped out the womb, I mean, I don't
You
remember.
popped out.
Yeah, dude, like a cannon. I obviously don't have any recollection of that. One of my younger brothers claims that he can remember being born, but he's also the most audacious of the three of us. So speaking of being a kid and having brothers, with my upbringing, I grew up on a basic standard American diet for the 90s. It's like there were some processed foods, but there was also a lot of like local eggs and meat and stuff like that. And I just remember as a kid, like really loving the local steak from, Farmer John next door. And it's like, that was the meal I looked forward to, was steak night every day of the week. But I also was addicted to like eating whole boxes of toaster strudel in the mornings and shit like that. Like,
Yeah.
I was a sugar machine. And as I grew into like an adolescent, I actually had a lot of mental health issues. In fact, I almost took my own life when I was in early high school. And that I do in part believe had something to do with nutrition, but I was also being very hard on myself in my own mind from, bullying and stuff. Yeah. I don't say it a lot because I don't believe in the woe is me sentiment.
Yeah.
I believe in empowerment, and you can't do that with a victim mentality. And so after that, I kind of became myself for maybe the first time ever. And then as I transitioned from high school to college, I was like, well, if everything really is in my power, then I can become stronger. I can attract the right woman. I can become more confident. Because I was playful, but I wasn't really confident. I didn't know who I was, as a lot of us are at that age. And so I started really diving deep into workouts and nutrition. And so between the ages of, let's say, like 17 and maybe 21, I was just getting the basics down. I went through this phase of like, I need pre-workout and protein, and just like whey protein out the ass.
By the way, if you need pre-workout, get Organic Muscle. It's my company. World's first USDA organic pre-workout, not like the pre-workouts you drink.
You know what's interesting about that? The ones I used to drink suck.
Yeah.
I went through a phase probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I haven't had pre-workout since, until I found you in your company before we knew each other well. And I that's the only pre-workout I've taken in the last probably decade.
Oh,
as an animal eater,
Yeah.
like a killer of souls. And so, which actually goes into into what I was going to say really well, because a lot of the products that I took costed a lot. They didn't really help my health. The thing that I learned from that phase was that eating unprocessed food and being consistent in your routine in the gym is the big thing that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And I put on a lot of size. I used to be like maybe $145 soaking wet at 6 foot. And I'm sitting at 205 now. I'm not as lean as I'd like to be, but in terms of my whole life, this is one of the more impressive physiques and the healthiest I've been, not only physically, but spiritually and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 21-ish, I started to get really obsessed with dieting, probably not in a healthy way too far, but there's some yields to my Athleticism that really like helped me learn a lot anecdotally, and of one, of course, just on myself at first. So I'm turning 30. What am I turning? 34 on Monday. I was like 34, 35, time dilation. 34 on Monday, a few days after this episode. And since 21, I have done probably 15 different diets or ways of eating, whatever you want to call it, for periods of 4 to 6, but typically 12 months of where I looked at, blood work, my Whoop stats, tracking what I eat, calories, lifestyle. And like, yes, there's a lot of variables, but in that time frame, some of the diets or the ways of eating that I've tried are, and it started an evolution similar to this. The first thing I did was actually vegetarian. And then I went vegan, and I didn't feel good doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went keto, but not like carnivore, like dirty keto, like carbs are bad. Mm-hmm. And then from that, I went to actual keto, and then paleo. And then in between there, I tried like fruitarian, the Mediterranean diet. I tried like, no grains, no dairy, no eggs, whatever. And I finally worked towards carnivore. Didn't feel great on that. And I went animal-based. I'm like, wow, I'm like 12 or 13 diet experiments in deep, and I feel the best I've ever felt. And blood work showed that. and my performance in the gym, my mental performance, my mental health, my sleep stats, everything reflected that. And so I said, okay, because I was addicted to experimenting. I'm like, you know what? Something about this is capturing my attention. I don't want to assume, because as we said before the podcast, in the past I'd been like, this is the way, but it wasn't the way. There was a nugget, and I took the nugget with me on the journey to the next experiment. And I became a collector of nuggets, producing my own belief system behind health and eating. And animal-based, though, really felt good. And so then instead of going to the next diet, I like to look for nuggets within variations of that diet. So I have pretty much eaten animal-based since then. I've tried like the sugar diet. I don't know if you heard of that, or like the sugar maxing. I've tried like going variations in like what kind, where my saturated fat is coming from and what amount, macros, like grains, no grains, dairy, no dairy, things under that umbrella. But generally have in the last 5.5 years eaten predominantly meat, dairy, eggs, fruit, tubers, occasionally some cooked vegetables. But that's been almost my entire diet, and my blood work is the best it's ever been. So I know it's a long story, but I think it's very important because a lot of people haven't done that. And that doesn't make me the expert, but I have a lot of N of one. And now with what I do for work, I see a lot more. I don't see as much volume now in my coaching because it's more small group and one-on-one. But when I worked for Paul Saladino at Heart and Soil, granted, it wasn't as in depth. I wasn't seeing everybody's labs, but we were getting, what would you say? People were reporting their findings to us via email. So I saw about 13,000 anecdotes within 2.5, 3 years. But obviously there's a lot to digest. There's variables, there's perception, there's a lot of things. So I'm reluctant to say that means this is the way, but it gave me enough things to chew on, because I think a mountain of anecdotes can equal a shred of truth. And so I pulled that shred of truth. I pulled my own shred of truth from my experience. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. But I am open to learning and being wrong, because I've already been wrong before. You know, I spoke at a conference called Hack Your Health here in Austin at the Palmer Event Center. And my whole topic was, you need to experiment voraciously, because if you have the audacity to believe that what you're doing now is the end point, look at everything that's happened before you. You're going to always have to make adjustments and pivot, but you need enough conviction to take action, but enough openness, like we talked about, with wisdom for flexibility.
Yes.
So long-winded, but I think it's very important, because I'm a staunch believer, but I also know that I have more to learn at the same time.
I love that. That totally resonates. Life's about gathering these nuggets of wisdom, and the only way to do that is through different life experiences. And it reminds me a lot of myself. I've done so many dietary experiments over the years, you know, everything from carnivore, vegan, back in the day, keto, the whole shebang. And, you know, when I originally tried a vegan diet, it was probably 10 years ago, it was a miserable failure for me. Did not go well. Then I was very overweight. I lost about probably 80 plus pounds when I was doing a blend of carnivore and animal based. So I 100% believe that a person can see positive results on an animal based diet. I've experienced it. Now, I did also have some negative results. A lot of my hair fell out. There was some weird mental stuff going on, but I lost weight, and losing weight is one of the best things you could do for your health, right? So I was a big proponent of animal-based diet for a long time. So being on this journey for the last 2 years of not eating meat, it shook me to my core. It shook everything I thought I knew. And what did it for me was a reorientation of my entire worldview. And it basically came from a very simple recognition that animals suffer and their life has value. They were created by God and they don't want to die. They want to live. And I asked myself, what right do I have to take the life of anything? Any being? It's, you know, do I want other beings to take my life? No. And I realized there's nothing as precious in the world to any being than its own life. It is the most precious thing. So I just started suffering a lot as I wrestled with this, suffering a lot, because it was so painful. I'm like, God, how could it be? Like I lost all this weight doing animal-based. And, in hindsight, I think it was really an elimination diet, me cutting out lots of things, lots of crap I was eating. But I wrestled with this idea for a long time about the morality. So there's a central axiom to the way I live my life now, and that is the golden rule. That's this thread that unites all of the world's religions. There's this central component of compassion, and Jesus taught us, to love the least of these. And I can't think of what could be more of the least of these than innocent animals that are killed to the tune of 90 billion per year, 90 billion land animals. So I didn't do this for my health. I didn't make this transition for my health. The reason I did it was because I love animals and I don't want to see them suffer. And we could get deeper into that conversation. But what I learned through this journey was while I did not do it to become healthy, my health has improved. And it took some experimentation. It wasn't simple, I should say. There's a lot of tests to run and things to try.
And interpretations of tests, and then
yes,
and margin of error. That's the hardest thing, whether it's blood work or DEXA scan or it's just there's a lot to sift through, no matter what diet you're doing.
Totally. And it really takes thoughtfulness about your life and paying attention to all different habits, not just the diet. Like, am I getting outside enough? Am I sitting too much?
Do I have a sense of fulfillment and purpose?
Yes.
That sometimes changes things more than a diet does, especially if you're generally eating real foods versus processed foods.
Yes.
So there's a lot of, what would you say, confounding variables,
Absolutely. And I think that's why people can also fail health-wise on any kind of diet if your mindset is all out of whack.
1,000% agree, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your take? Obviously from all your experiences, you've seen a lot of people get healthier on an animal-based diet, anecdotally, all your experiences with Paul Saladino. But what do you have to say for the suffering of these animals? Should we take any account into that factor?
It's a really good question. And I have thought about it a lot because, for context, I think I was 23 when I was vegan. So I was younger and I didn't have the same worldview that I have now, but I did it not fully out of the ethically reason. At least the first time you did it, it sounds like it was the second time that it was like you really had this emphasis on ethically, I can't take lives of other living creatures. The first time I was like, oh, that's an added benefit, but I wanted to do the diet experiment. But I actually got more concerned with the lives of animals, and that's part of what I liked about animal-based, which you kind of hit it in your Steelman summary, is I believe that, unfortunately, the way that the natural world is, although there's beauty, and God made everything, and I'm with you on that. And I think every being, that's a great way to say it. Every being, the most precious thing to them is their life. But there's also a life cycle, and it's a transfer of energy. And even the plants need the dead animals to survive. And there's this circle of life that you and I will be a part of, inevitably. What I don't like is machine farming or this mass agriculture. It's not regenerative to the environment. It's not ethical, and it does slaughter lives, and there's not a good quality of life. I'm more concerned about the quality of life of plants and animals and all things in nature. But nature is metal, and it's mental. And if you see things out in the wild, clearly taking life is part of the natural cycle. So I'm not going to spin my wheels trying to fight that because I don't think we'll ever be able to succeed. So how can I work within the natural laws to have reverence for when I do take a life? And for me, when you look at a lot of the old tribes around the globe, they had a unique reverence over hunting and killing, and they knew that they were taking a life, and therefore the energy that they were procuring, they needed to do something with it. And I find that really motivating. And so I think a big issue here is we're so disconnected with our food and where it comes from. And so I think if people had more reverence, that they would do more with their lives. So if they're going to take energy away from another being, they should be putting it to good use. And that's very motivating for me because I don't take it lightly, that there's been so much to get me here at this table talking to you and doing what I do in this world. I'm beyond grateful. And that gratefulness is, in a way, holds me accountable. There's a lot of other aspects of this, which I'm sure we'll get to, so I'll have to find a stopping point. But the next and the last thing I'll say before I bounce it back to you is monocropping, in my opinion, is the only way to feed, and this isn't even nutrients, it's just calories, to feed the human population. And that kills more animals than one. Slaughtering a cow could feed a normal family of 5, maybe not me because I eat like a horse, ironically, for a few months. And that's one being. But the amount of avocados that it would take to feed a family would take acres and acres, and you're killing so many birds and insects and stuff. So there's this other question of, do all souls have the same weighted value? Is there a level or a hierarchy of sentience? I don't know the answers to these questions, but whenever I was, thinking about the ethics behind my way of eating and living, I think about these things. And I would rather have a cow in a regenerative situation where it's not adding carbon to the cycle. The carbon just going through its normal, natural cycle. This cow lives a great life, and then eventually you slaughter it and you have reverence for it, and you and your family benefit from that. I would rather do that than eat a bunch of vegetables that are shipped all around the globe, who are creating much more issues for the environment by just getting them to where people buy them, because people aren't buying produce locally. And you're not going to get enough calories to survive. So talking about like souls and beings, wanting to live a good life, you'll perish if you don't get enough calories. And that's really hard to do without having a negative impact on other creatures in the environment. And so you could argue some of those are logistical ways, but I just don't know from a pragmatic perspective if humans can survive nutritionally and calorically, even in the modern world, on plant foods alone. And I think that even procuring plant foods is going to create a lot of death. So that's my general summary on those topics. But I'm curious what you think, because I'm sure you came to this battle armed to the teeth.
Well, I honestly agree with some of what you said, and there was a lot to touch on there. So I'm going to do my best to remember. But what I do agree about is the lack of reverence and really even consciousness regarding the food we're eating is one of the things that upsets me the most about modern American culture. I really think most meat eaters, not all, not people like you, but they don't even put it together that they're eating an animal that was killed. It's just a burger.
You're so right, man.
They've completely divorced from the reality that that was an animal that had sentience, it had the capacity to suffer, and it lived a miserable life in a factory farm. And I think it's really important to remember that 99% of animals are factory farmed. That is 99% of the animals eaten in America.
Now they are.
Now they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
But at one point it wasn't like that. Yeah.
That's true. So in my opinion, what the farming system has become is totally demonic. And I even have more respect for hunters who go out and at least they're doing it themselves. At least they're taking personal responsibility and have some connection to nature. I still disagree with taking the life of an innocent animal, but at least they're doing it themselves and not passing the buck and living in complete ignorance, right? So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point, take me through some of the other things you said.
I really, because you brought up another good point, because again, I think part of this discussion is that we probably agree on more than we disagree on. Yeah. It's just like politics. Most people want the same thing. You just disagree on how to get there. And so that's a great point. And I need to point something out in myself. I'm a hypocrite. I've never hunted. I've benefited from friends who hunt, but where I grew up, there's excess population of deer. I love venison. It was brought to me. I didn't have to learn how to do it. And now that I believe what I believe, I actually have a lot of guilt with not knowing, never harvesting an animal firsthand. I feel like I need to get reconnected with my food. So it's a good point. But some of the other points that I brought up were monocropping and how that has a lot of.
I'm just going to start writing stuff down so I can remember.
Hopefully I'll remember them all too. And I could even list out some more that I know we'll get to if you want.
Yes.
Monocropping and the number of lives that it takes.
Yes.
Feasibly feeding the world on plant foods alone, just from like a caloric standpoint. But there's also the impact on the environment that's more negative than if animals were regeneratively raised.
Yeah.
And then there's like the whole hierarchy of souls and sentience, and does that go into your belief or maybe
Yes.
other people's, belief of what's right and what's wrong. I think those were the big topics, those
Yes,
3 or
that's
4.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so regarding plant agriculture, the vast majority of it goes to feed animal agriculture. If anyone's listening right now, you could go on Soy Farmers of America. It might be Soy Growers of America, their website. 97% of soy in America is grown. Guess where it goes? To
Animal
feed
feed.
cattle and chickens.
I
Okay.
don't think it should be fed to cattle and chickens.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to grow soy. I don't think we need to do any monocropping. But
Yeah.
that's deeper down the rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
I think it's part of the problem. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about with the modern food. We have a system that, like, if you look at what crops are subsidized by the government, and I don't think the government's all evil, but they're really
Pretty
incentivized
bad.
to make a profit first and care about people's health and the good of the world and the future of the world second, if not third or last. And so we have to realize that the things that are used for animal feed aren't what regenerative and ethical farmers are feeding their animals. And so I think there's probably common ground for us, because it's like, if we could delete that, erase it, I would. I don't think we need that much soy. I
Yeah.
don't think we need that many grains and other things, especially for animal feed. I would be happier if it didn't work out that way. But these crops are not profitable. They're cheap, and they go into a lot of processed foods, and they're fed to animals, and farmers are paid to grow them.
Yeah.
And in fact, having a cow is not that expensive in nature, but it is in the modern system because of what's subsidized and what's not, because of the infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And there's these extremely corrupt big ag corporations like Monsanto, right? And there's a ton of lobbying and corruption and all of the glyphosates. I mean, I've had an organic company for 11 years now. I'm very familiar, and it's really dark what's going on and how they're poisoning the food supply. But to act like the government isn't massively subsidizing the meat and dairy industries it's massive. And I don't have the exact stats, but look it up if you're at home. The government subsidizes the meat industry, and most meat farms, most cattle farms would be operating at a loss if not for these subsidies. So it's, when I was carnivore, I really thought there was like this conspiracy against meat and that it was this like vegan agenda, but only like 3% of people are vegan in the United States. Maybe another.
It's gone down.
Yeah, it
in
has.
the last like 5 to 10 years.
It has gone down. The carnivore craze has kicked in, but I think it might be going on its way down, as I think these things go in waves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I was going to say is, I had a question when you were talking about not hunting. Do you think you would eat meat as much as you did if you had to kill the animals yourself?
I would like to think so, because, and we have an excuse, right, of what we choose to prioritize in life. But I love the idea of getting these old skills that we don't have in the modern world. I live in an apartment in downtown Austin, and I walk around Lady Bird Lake with my dogs on leashes. But one day I want to own land, and I want to be able to hunt. I want to teach my kids these skills. I want to have my own cows and chickens. And well, actually, ducks are better than chickens, but that's a different topic. For the eggs, and I want to buy everything local, but it's unfortunately expensive because of the infrastructure that's been set up that I think is somewhat nefarious and intentional to keep us from getting in touch with our food. And so I would like to. It's impossible for me to know, but from a primal perspective, and because I care about this, I would like to think that I would still eat meat even if I had to do the dirty deed. In fact, I might be a better person because I know what it costs to get the energy that I'm using.
Right.
And I don't know that, but I would like to think so. And again, I think what we're uncovering right now is everything that is subsidized and influenced by the government that has to do with food, is whether it's monocropping or it's like big operations for agriculture, I do think that is evil. I don't use the word demonic very often, but if I were to, I would say that that's as close as it gets.
What is specifically?
Just like augmenting the food infrastructure and system to incentivize unethical practices, no matter whether it's animal production or plant food production. I think all of it is evil. I think we need to go back to buying locally and supporting local farmers that don't treat their animals this way.
Yeah.
I think that's a big I hate to have a Band-Aid for a solution that's cosmic, but I really do think that that's where it starts. It's like,
Yeah.
know what you're buying, educate yourself. Like you talked about the health process and just these variables. It's arduous. Do it when you buy your food. Be intentional. Vote with your dollar. Like make
Yeah.
sure it goes to the entities that are making good food, not the ones that are profiting off of mass production and unethical practices, whether it's monocropping or machine farming, you know?
Yeah. And I would like to see, really, I've dedicated my life to seeing the world move in that direction. And, I don't expect everyone to become a vegetarian or vegan. That's not a likely scenario. So if we can move in a direction where at least the animals are treated a bit better and live a better life, but still at the end of the day, I can't wrap my head around how it is ethical still to kill an innocent animal against its will. It wants to live. It was created by God. It suffers. And I just don't know if we have the right to take it. Now, survival situations, that's different. I totally understand. I understand that the history of humanity, it was difficult. We were battling for our lives. But now we live in this world of abundance and we do not have to kill. And do you believe in karma? You reap what you sow. Do you think there are laws of the universe where, good is rewarded or evil is punished?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have a good answer for you because I go back and forth and I love toying with these ideas. If I had to believe something, it'd be very simple. And I believe that I know that my actions are either going to have good or bad repercussions. So I won't be able to sleep with myself unless I'm doing the best I can to be good and have my actions have good repercussions. Now, whether that's karmic or universe or whatever it is, I don't know. And I'm probably not going to waste much time because that's just how my brain works and how I choose. I'm a minimalist at heart. I just know that I feel better when I do my best and what I think is best, even though if I'm not sure it's best. And so, yeah, that's how I would answer that question.
Okay, fair enough. So if in a roundabout way, it sounds like you're saying yes.
No, because I don't know if there's repercussions. Like, I don't know if it comes back around or not. I just know that, like, I can live with myself.
Do you think
better.
there's objectively right and wrong or good and evil?
I used to think so. And now I wonder if people's perceptions of that are distorted based off of what they've been through or what challenges they have in their way. I can interpret other people's actions or things in the world. It's good and evil, but I don't know if they're inherently that way. I would like to think at the extremes that they are, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting question to wrestle with. The way I like to think about it is sin is the doing of harm to other beings, and a right is any activity that doesn't harm another sentient being. So the reason I asked the question is, we're killing 90 billion land animals per year, most of them in the most atrocious slavery system where they're being kept in pens where they can't move. They're artificially inseminated. They give birth. The child is ripped away from them. They're jacked full of antibiotics. They're living in their own feces. Then they're shipped off to a slaughterhouse where they're slaughtered. And by the way, the pasture-raised animals are also shipped off to, it's like a Saw movie.
It's just like a label that makes you feel better about it.
Yeah.
But it's not really any better.
So is there any karmic retribution for this? What is humanity setting itself up for? And what right do we actually have to kill animals? Where does this right come from? Where you believe that if it benefits us, we have the right to end their life or to force them into some form of slavery?
These are all really good questions, and I almost don't want to answer because I think about it so differently. I don't think we have a right to take lives. I think that's natural, and I think one day our lives will be taken in one way or the other. Yeah. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think we'll live forever. And so I think it is cyclical. It's not karmic. I think it's just part of living is death. And I know our culture, death is a big taboo. And I do think it is unfortunate when lives are taken when they don't need to be. Yeah. I would certainly agree with that. And that I don't feel like that's a good thing. However, again, pragmatically, I believe in nature, but I also believe in God. I believe in evolution, but I also believe that might have been a tool that God used. Yeah. And so I believe that the battle between good and evil spiritually is not that dissimilar to the battle of what is perceived as good and evil in nature and in this life. In fact, there's a lot of days that I wonder if there is a heaven or hell. That's just what we make of the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to get into all those existential questions, but the reason I say that is practically, from a nutritional standpoint, it seems very difficult for humans to be the best version of themselves and to treat animals well if their basic needs aren't met. So if they don't get the calories and the vitamins and the minerals, and there's a lot of vitamins and minerals that as vegan or vegetarian you need to supplement with.
Just B12, really.
I mean, carnitine, choline, there's a lot of different things. There's a long list, if especially for longevity. And this is things that a lot, if you look at vegan influencers or studies, they will admit these things. And so to me, that's curious because I believe in the natural world. And I don't like straying too far of it, even though I'm basically swallowing this piece of plastic. I'm just deep throating it over here. And so I wonder, like, okay, if we were meant from God's perspective to consume solely plants, why is it so difficult? And also, I still stand by the point of with monocropping. Let's say I'm wrong, which I don't believe that I am, because there's a lot of evidence, and I don't like to rely on studies, but there's a lot of evidence that shows vegans and vegetarians need to supplement with a good list of things. Let's say I'm wrong. From a caloric standpoint alone, you would kill so many animals from monocropping, and I don't see how you could feed people calorically without monocropping, and then distributing that around the world. So just from a pragmatic perspective, the logistics seem pretty screwed up if that's the way that we want to go do it. And with ethical regenerative agriculture, it's actually feasible to feed the whole world off of ethically raised animals. There's just not financial incentive. And this goes back to, I think for you and me, the evil is with the system more than the way of eating. I think that we have a lot of middle ground there. Maybe I'm wrong. But really, I do think people should be eating plants. I tried carnivore and keto multiple times. I think it is a short-term diet for circumstantial use. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people I know that would probably slit my throat if they were in this room hearing me say that, especially because of my connections to what I've done. But I really think that we're omnivores. However, if you look in the natural world, omnivores specialize. There's no such thing as a 50-50 herbivore, carnivore, omnivore. All omnivores, in order to survive and evolve, had to specialize. So they were carnivore leaning or plant leaning. And just because of everything from like our molars to the face shape, the pH of our guts, the length of the intestinal tract, the vitamins and minerals that we need, and what forms that they come in, we seem like animal-based eating, leaning omnivores from like a physiological evidence. And there's another word, I forget, it's not paleontologist. I forget what it is, but they study these things. And that seems to be like a pretty congruent idea. So I really struggle with seeing pragmatically, logically, and from an evolutionary / physiological perspective, how we could feed the whole world on plants without killing more animals than we do already.
Yeah. Well, it's good points. I would say there's a lot to touch on there, but
I know I keep giving you a snowstorm worth
bring
of
it
things.
on.
I'm
Bring
sorry,
it on.
dude.
I'm just like,
and I know I'm talking a lot, so I really want to hear what you have to say.
No, you're doing great, man. And I appreciate you being here so much. So regarding monocropping, again, most of these crops go to feed animals, the vast majority. So there's way more hectares of land going. It's the least efficient way to farm, okay? Because those same crops could feed way more people, but when you take it through the animal agriculture process, that nutrition gets diluted into the animals. So in my opinion, you're losing a ton of the nutrition. The other thing to note is, so if you truly believe that a lot of animals are being killed in these monocrop farms, then the best way to end that is to go vegan or vegetarian, because it requires way less monocropping. Again, because the majority of it is going to feed animals. Now, the next point I would make is, if you look at the combines, I don't think this is really that true, that all these animals are being killed. Some are, obviously, and then the Monsanto-style pesticides are an abomination. But if you look at the combines, like 70% of the crops use combines that are 2 feet above the ground. So it's a massive machine, tons. And these little mice, you think they don't hear a massive machine rolling through the field? The combines, there's all these videos, and we'll show a clip. You can lay under it and it will go right over you. Okay, so it's not like going through and just wiping out everything on the ground. It's tilling 2 feet above the ground. So that's about 70% of the crops. And then you have to think, what would be the deaths of animals in this space if it was just if it was wild forests or wild land? There would still be predators and prey. There would be animals being killed in a natural state as well, right? So those are a few points to hit about the monocropping. And again, I don't agree with it. I don't think it's the best form of agriculture. I think we need to move to a more local form. But it's important to remember that at its core, you don't need to kill a tree to take its fruit. You don't have to kill the plant, right? For many different types of species. So there is a way to have a harmonious relationship, a harmonious agricultural relationship with a lot of these different food groups, where intrinsically baked into animal agriculture, there is the suffering and death of that animal. So I'm not saying plant agriculture is perfect, but we actually have a path. We know what to do, we know how to get there.
Experience the power of nature with the Organic Muscle Pre-Workout. 20 organic superfoods, plus mushrooms, fruit, and clean caffeine for smooth energy, powerful strength, increased stamina, and full body nourishment. There's no jitters, no crash, no BS. Just pure organic energy for your healthiest life.
Regarding us being natural carnivores, I disagree with that. I think we're probably more like frugivores.
I would say it's omnivore. With animal, like a carnivore leaning. Again, it's a spectrum.
Why don't children have any instinct whatsoever to kill animals? If you put a child in a room with a small animal, they would be so happy. They want to play with it. They don't have any instinct to attack it, to rip it apart, to eat its flesh.
Well, they weren't the ones hunting, you know.
But if that's naturally part of our DNA and our food, you know, I've seen kids and they love fruit. Like they see fruit, it's like just within their being. But I have never seen a kid just like want to kill an animal. So what's your take on that?
So I think, if a dog and a cat don't grow up together, they're pretty what would you say, aggressive to one another. But if they grow up together, they can be best friends. And so there's something to that. And I'll just leave that at that. But from the natural carnivore side of things, there's actually a ton of videos and I don't want to say studies, but maybe like observational case studies of foods being set in front of children, infants. And they love their saturated fat, dude. They go right for the butter. They go for the meat. They'll eat organs. It's wild. And fruit. I love fruit. I was fruitarian for the time, and outside animal based, that was the second best I ever felt, and that's the second best I performed in stuff. I couldn't eat enough to not lose weight, which was tough because I was trying to put on muscle, like I talked about. I was skinny, but I think plants have a place in the human diet. I'm not saying they're not essential, but I don't think that we should be relying on the majority of our calories, vitamins, and minerals to come from plant foods. And I've seen children thrive on being animal based. In fact, I have my brother and several friends. They have their first kid, and they said there's a lot of things they said no to. Right, it wasn't just like eating a standard American diet. Right, there were also certain vaccines they chose not to get. They also like have a very healthy, stimulating environment with not too many extremes. They took screens rather. They took raising their child to the nth degree and trying to be particular about their health, and these children are just like developing at a much better rate. Their health is better. And I saw these anecdotes when I was at Heart and Soil as the lead health coach. We got people writing in all the time that were reversing infertility and pregnancy issues by having more organs and more animal foods. And I never would tell someone to go carnivore or keto to have a healthy birth, or even not to feed their child plant foods. Again, I'm not a doctor, but based off the thousands of anecdotes that I've seen professionally and the hundreds I've seen personally, there's a theme there that's really hard for me to ignore.
Yeah.
And part of me wishes it was simpler.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, oh, I love dogs. I got two. I lived on a farm for a time. I've worked, not like combines and stuff, but I've seen the fields being worked. But they do kill, like there's deaths on a farm all the time, even if there's no animals being harvested, right? Even if it's just plants being harvested. And like that's what I'm saying. It's a way of life. I don't think we can search for some sort of utopia where lives are not killed before maybe we would like them to, or lives aren't lost before we'd like them to.
I agree, but we should aim to minimize them.
For sure.
Right?
We agree on that for sure. But especially young boys, they have a drive to learn how to stalk and hunt animals. At least I think so. And that's really interesting if that's not meant to be part of what we're to do. And from a I know I'm jumping around a lot. From a spiritual perspective, there's a lot of sacrifices in the Bible. There's a lot of things related to this. And I don't really see, and you probably know better than I do, but I don't really see a point of, oh, you can't do this. It's more like reverence. Even like Jesus as a sacrificial lamb is very metaphorical, albeit literal, depending on what you believe. And I don't think that that's evil. And I don't think that that's like, I think it's like a reverence, like oh my gosh, look at what was done so I could live. That's like, I don't know how you get more parallel than that. And I know we need to go more down that route. So I just wanted to say one more thing on monocropping. Cool. And we can wrap that up unless you have something to say to it. I think the substitute of monocropping to feed animals to people would have the same amount of issues, if not more. Because if you imagine, let's say we don't eat any animal foods, we have to do so much more monocropping in order to feed people. From just a caloric, not even a vitamin and mineral standpoint. And so like, I agree with you. I do not like monocropping. I don't think soy, pick your grain or crop. I don't think we should be feeding animals. I think they should be in their natural environment. I don't think that we should be, I think monocropping and just like any kind of mass scale farming in general has a very net negative effect on the environment, more than cow farts ever will, And so I see a lot more detriment to trying to force people to rely on one food source and carting that all around the world, and in order to eat enough of all the right kinds of fruits and vegetables to be marginally healthy, there's just a lot of physically putting it on a truck or a shipping container and getting it everywhere. And I just don't think that that's good for the environment.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, the show Alone, I don't know if you ever watched it.
Oh yeah.
Obviously it's a northern latitude, so there's not as many like fruits or vegetables to eat, but like they can't survive and so again, you were in a land of abundance today, to your point, but at what cost is my question. It's like, does that abundance go away if you go back to eating a more regenerative way?
Think so.
And I know I just threw a lot at you.
It's all right. I like it. So, well, I'll start with that question. I do think we should move to a more local agricultural style, and think about all of our lawns. Like, we just have these meaningless lawns that require all this water, right? What if we just had more community-based farming where one person grows this, one person grows that, we trade and barter? I see that as the future.
That'd be so good.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but regarding the monocropping, again, it's wasteful to use all of this monocropping for animal agriculture. We could end world hunger just by using the crops we grow for animals, take that and feed it to people, and it's more than enough. And
from a calorie standpoint,
yeah,
I've never seen anything that suggests.
Well, if you're watching, you can look it up and verify if I'm right or wrong. But it's
But I guess that's my point. Like if we stop feeding the animals, but we feed the people, you're still left with the downside of monocropping. That's my issue with it.
Well, the goal is to move away from that.
Yeah,
100%. I've dedicated my life to opposing these agricultural giants. I'm not a fan of the system, just like you oppose factory farming, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we can have this conversation and come together and try and change some things. You mentioned supplementation, how vegans need supplementation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think it's that much. There might be a few things. Look at the degradation of our soil. Look at the degradation of everything. I mean, in biblical days, they used to just survive on bread half the time.
Milk and honey.
Milk and honey. They would eat these super simple diets, but wheat was so nutrient
different.
dense.
It's different.
It's
than it
totally
is now.
different. It's
Yeah.
been totally corrupted. I call it the war on bread. Bread used to be a superfood, and now it's a cause of illness, right? Getting into Jesus and the Bible, I could talk all day about that. I have a whole podcast about it with Aaron Abke called The Jesus Way, and that is such a deep discussion. But what I will say is that the ideal throughout the Bible is kindness and compassion and the golden rule. The ideal of the Garden of Eden, God gives dominion to man, right? Dominion, that's what this whole conversation is about. Do we have the right to kill animals? Yeah, God gave us the dominion over them. God gives us dominion. Then right in the next passage, he prescribes a plant-based diet to humanity, clear as day, in the Garden of Eden. So we have the beginning, peace, compassion, harmony. That is what the Garden of Eden is. And then we have all the prophecies about what the kingdom of heaven is in Isaiah. And the wolf will lay with the lamb. The lion shall eat straw like a bull. A child will be able to reach his arm in a serpent's nest and be fine. So it's this prophecy that in the beginning and the end, the ideal state is obviously peace and harmony. Do you think there's slaughterhouses in heaven? You know, we're going to a place, I think God's highest ideal is us treating all animals with mercy and compassion because we all come from the same source. The same God that makes my heartbeat and your heartbeat makes a cow suffer, makes a cow's heartbeat. The same air that fills our lungs, it's the same for a pig. Okay? So we might be different, but we're not that different. And we all have the capacity for suffer. And I really don't think that God wants to see any of his children suffer. If God is omnipotent, if God is omniscient, God's everywhere, then God's right there when these animals are being killed. Now, regarding the animal sacrifice, half of the Old Testament prophets, Hosea, Jeremiah, all of them said, guys, what are you doing? God doesn't need you to sacrifice an animal to forgive your sins. This is an abomination. King David even talked about it. They said, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. Why does the omnipotent God of the universe need you to kill a goat to forgive your sins? Why can't God just forgive your sins when you repent? And then getting into the Essenes, they were the mystical Jewish sect that broke away from Judaism, from the temple cult that was doing these sacrifices. We know John the Baptist was a vegetarian. We know he was an Essene, or according to most historians believe that. Jesus said he was the greatest man ever born of a woman. Jesus clearly came from this Essene-type philosophy. And we know this is true because James the Just, Jesus' brother, the first leader of the church, was a lifelong vegetarian. Hegesippus, the earliest Christian historian, said that he was a vegetarian since his mother's womb. Eusebius said that all 12 of the disciples were vegetarians, and he's the father of church history. And this is some of the information that made me really curious. It seems like everyone was a vegetarian except Jesus. So if you want to learn more about this, we believe that Jesus was a vegetarian. We deep dive into it in our podcast.
Heard any of this.
Yeah, it could be mind bending.
I believe
But
it.
when you look in the church history, why were so many of the first Christians, the disciples, vegetarians, but Jesus was not? Now, we have deep dives about the fish stories, the Passover lamb, everything that's coming up for people. There's plenty of information that once you see it, it might open your eyes. But I totally understand if you think Jesus ate fish or whatever. It says it in the Bible. But is there a difference? This is what I'll go back to you on.
Okay.
Is there a difference between eating fish once a week or once a month that you're catching with your friends and eating meat 3 times a day? The difference in suffering, the difference in supporting a really oppressive institution and system. And then my next question is, could you be healthy if you believe meat makes you healthier? Could you be healthier if you ate meat once a week as opposed to 3 times a day or whatever you do currently?
Man, I love this because those are really good, and you're very intentional with your questions. And there's also a lot that I'm not familiar with when it comes to the Bible. Like I'm a non-denominational
Yeah.
Christian, grew up in the Methodist church. My girlfriend's a devout Catholic, and I love learning all this stuff. But man, there's a lot I don't know.
Yeah.
And so what I'll say first is I will defer to you on the knowledge base of what has occurred and not biblically, even though I pay reverence to that.
Yeah.
I also see it as like themes and storytelling more than taking things too literal. The devil in the details is
Totally.
like a really good point.
Absolutely.
But I do have some comments on it. But I want to
Yeah.
answer your question first. So the sugar maxing diet, a lot of people lose a lot of weight on it and they feel really good. And that would have you really only eat a lot of saturated fat or fats in general, along with animal protein, really like once a week, to your point. However, that puts people in a stress state. And so it's very hard to do very long without sacrificing a lot of hormone issues and stuff like that. To go back and forth, to have like, you have a very little bit of protein, ideally animal protein, but feasibly in your case, you could have vegan or vegetarian protein in the evening. But a guy your size or my size, probably like 50 to 80 grams of protein a day tops. And you can preserve your muscle mass and you can lose fat. Especially if you're able to keep your fats low, whether those are, monounsaturated or saturated or whatever. But from a nutrient standpoint, with the amount of stress that we have on us in the modern world, and if you're lifting and you're really pushing yourself, I don't know if I ate meat at a less frequency, if I would really feel better. I haven't seen it work for people. Out of all the diets I've tried, I have not tried that. I haven't tried like let me just eat meat once a week. I was pescatarian, I did the Mediterranean diet. I went all in on meat, all on nothing on meat, but I haven't done something at that frequency, so it's hard for me to speak to.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure,
what do you
sure.
think of Novak Djokovic and some of the best athletes in the world who are vegan? Would that potentially prove that it is possible to be extremely healthy and athletic and strong on a vegan diet?
I think, ironically, they rely on monocropping to get enough protein in. And a lot of protein powder, not from real food. So I guess I didn't really do a good job saying this. I really believe when I say unprocessed foods, I don't like seed oils. I don't like, all the things on the label and boxes and bags that you don't understand. In fact, I prefer not to have anything in boxes or bags. I prefer it to be a fruit or a vegetable or a meat or something like that. And I love seafood, by the way. That's not pertinent to anyone listening. I just wanted everyone to know.
So
like I'm a shrimp connoisseur. I don't think that evolutionarily those athletes would exist because the amount of plant food they would have to get in order to compete at that level would just not be available. It takes processing and shipping and monocropping to give those athletes what they need in order to perform. And they're not having 80 grams of protein a day. They're having a lot. And there's not that many of them. And you could argue that maybe it's because the modern world doesn't promote doing that for athletes. I just know anecdotally there are a lot more successful athletes. There's even more successful carnivore ones than there are vegan ones, ironically. But that's mostly endurance sports, like soccer players, for example. There's quite a few of those.
If you look at ultra endurance sports like long distance running, there's a ton of vegans.
Really?
Ton.
I didn't know
that.
that.
The greatest ultra distance runner, I'm blanking on his name. The greatest ultra distance marathoner of all time was vegan.
Really?
There's a bunch of them.
Are they from Kenya? Because I was like, I just know that's where all the runners, like the epic runners, come out of.
I think they're
and I don't know what a Kenyan diet looks like. Yeah. But well, it just goes to show you we don't know what we don't know in terms of like, I didn't know there was these athletes. Maybe you didn't know there were those athletes that were carnivore. But there is actually an underlying principle that I find very fascinating. Is like, what if there's benefits to extremism from a diet perspective? What if your body, because we are omnivores, even though you could argue, like I said, maybe more carnivore-leaning omnivores or animal-based eating omnivores, what if, because bodies are so efficient, like if you give it testosterone, it creates less, and that's how it is with everything, not just hormones. So if you eat one way, and it's one of the two extremes, you create an efficiency for your gut and for all these other things in your body, and there are benefits to that. But they're typically short-term benefits, and you have things that fall off. In fact, if you look at the percentage of vegan or vegetarian advocates that document all their stuff on YouTube, and they've done it for years, their health doesn't go well in the long run. And you don't really see that from people. I know the term animal-based is new, but being animal-based is not new. And you don't really see that same issue if they're not in processed foods. Like it happens all the time. Like if you do a side-by-side of a vegan influencer, 20, 30 years later, they look like they've aged exponentially, and they have a lot
so
of health
funny because
problems.
I've seen the same thing with carnivores, but
Well, keto carnivore is different than animal-based.
Yeah.
And I don't really see, animal-based influencers that are like that unhealthy. At least I haven't seen them.
If y'all are watching, check out Lenny Kravitz. He's been a vegan for like 20 years. The guy looks incredible. And obviously there's a way to do a vegan or vegetarian diet that's very unhealthy, and there's a way to do it that is healthy. And I will say, I've seen some vegans who look terrible. They look very unhealthy, but also some of the healthiest people I've ever seen, the most vibrant, they have this glow to them, are vegans as well. Yeah, 100%. And that's actually what has inspired me on this journey, is seeing that there's this woman, Adama, she's on YouTube, this black woman. She's like, I think she might be 70 and she looks like she's 40. And there's quite a few of these people out there, and it involves, a lot of fruit and a well-balanced diet that takes some thought. But I believe you can also be healthy on an animal-based diet. I've seen it. But the thing for me is, if I can be healthy on a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet or an animal-based diet, I'm going to choose the diet that I believe causes less harm and less suffering, because I don't want to contribute to that. And even if I'm going to be 5% less energized, which I don't think I am, I think I have more energy, but I'd even be willing to make that sacrifice to have a little less energy or whatever, because not participating in
There's been a few Freudian slips this podcast.
Sacrificing. Yeah, there has been.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my rant. You son of a gun.
I thought we played Frisbee on the podcast. You brought up a lot of good points, and it actually takes me back to some of the more spiritual or religious things that I wanted to touch on, because you really brought up some interesting things. And all I can say, I can't argue about the details of the text. I can just say the questions that come to mind when you say what you've said, and if those things are true.
Please.
I find it interesting that you said, like, why does God need you to sacrifice a goat? If he's, all powerful, can he just wash your sins away? I would have the same question about why it was necessary for his son to be sacrificed, if that's the case,
Yeah.
And that's just a logical thing. In fact, I have a lot, when it comes to free will and Jesus and all these things, I have a lot of questions like that, even when it's not related to diet. Maybe not for this podcast though, but, and then the Eden versus after Eden, that's interesting. Maybe that is the utopia that's ideal, but that's been stripped away from us. So we have to operate, like, live it in the world, but not of the world in a way. And like, to your point, it's a choice to eat or do whatever. But I actually, it's so ironic. I eat animal-based for the same reasons you eat plant-based. We just choose to believe different things, but we have the same goal. It goes back to what I said about politics. If you look at politics, like, the fringes are really, and just any any highly contested subject or topic, is the margins are the loudest, but the 80-ish% of people in the middle want the same thing. They just differ on how to get there. And so that's what, as we continue to talk, what's important to you is really important to me, which is what's fascinating. We just like, okay, this is the data we're given. We have to choose something to believe in. Otherwise we do nothing. And that's not helping anything. And we want to live our best lives and be the healthiest version of ourselves without causing negative, unnecessary pain and suffering, or, soul or life stealing. And so I resonate with that. We just choose to do it a little differently, which is really interesting.
It is.
And then, just like with the Eden thing, let's say that was true, and all those examples, which were very poetic and awesome, and I had forgotten until you said them, so I'm glad you did. That would be great, but we know that's not how the world works. So again, I come back to this lens of pragmatism, and like, what are we reasonably able to do in this imperfect world in order to survive without causing unnecessary harm? And it brings me back to a question, and I want to hear what you have to say, but I really would love this question answered, because do you believe in, like, a hierarchy of sentience? Like, are there certain, because that obviously could play into effect here, because I know some people that think a life is a life, no matter how big or small. And then the other people are like, oh no, certain organisms have a higher, like, soul or life or cognizance or whatever, because depending on what people listening think or what you and I think, it's like, does a grasshopper have the same weight of life as a humpback whale? You know, it's like not only are they very different in terms of weight, but also in intellect and things like that. So yeah. Take it away,
That's a
dude.
great question. I really like that. I do believe there is a hierarchy of sentience. There's different densities of consciousness. And I believe, you know, every time if I have to make a decision between a human and an animal, I would choose the human because I believe humans are made in the image of God. However, I believe we are to be good stewards of nature and respect nature. That's what I believe dominion is. It's like responsibility to the animals. So, you know, there are absolutely plant life is on a lower density than animal life. Plants don't have a brain. They don't have a central nervous system. They don't have pain receptors. They absolutely cannot suffer in the way that animals do, although they probably do have some form of ethereal group consciousness. Now, bugs are interesting. Like ants, I kind of consider them like a hive of bugs is almost like one organism.
Yeah, they function like a nervous system.
They're like,
the networks that they create is wild. Like they poured concrete down this one abandoned anthill for days, and then you could see, or cement. There's a difference between the two. One would work from a physics perspective, and the other couldn't. I don't remember which was which, but it was like basically like a whole auditorium's worth of a network from one anthill that they somehow coordinated different chambers for letting food like rot until they could eat it, and like birthing chambers. And it's like, how does such a simple creature construct something that's like so like masterfully engineered?
It's insane.
It blows my mind.
So
that's why I wonder about the sentience thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, as far as I know, bugs don't have central nervous systems, and they don't feel pain like that.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I thought they did.
They have a exoskeleton.
Yeah.
I don't think they have pain receptors in the way animals do.
Oh, really?
But I was talking to a friend about this recently, and I think like it's kind of like the nest is like one organism, and then the individual ants would be like a cell. If one dies, like the hive goes on. It's like the organism survives kind of thing. I don't know though. But in my opinion, there is a hierarchy of consciousness and sentience. I don't think we should do our best to avoid harming plants and bugs, but it's very clear that a dog is different than a parsnip. And that's another question I wanted to talk to you about. You know, what's the difference between your dogs and an innocent cow? And then I'll get to your other questions because those are good.
You know, I don't know as much about the actual differences, so I can just speak to what I think is true based off observation. Is the way that my dogs, both of them, look at me, that we're having an interaction. And I'm not saying cows can't be there because people have cows as pets and things like that. But again, back to the natural order, the dogs, and it depends on what you believe of the evolution of dog or whatnot, but it seems like dogs, or rather wolves and people, have a lot of parallels. The social hierarchy, how they hunt, how they take care of their own, seasonal eating. Like they're technically omnivores too, just much more carnivore leaning than we are. And it's really interesting that you can communicate so much through a look. And I've actually gone to a couple of wolf sanctuaries. I love them so much. They're my favorite animal. Wow. And there's just a level of intelligence and sentience that I think is beyond that of a cow. And I know wolves, more than dogs, their jaw size and their brain size are like 4 to 10 times larger than depending on the domestic breed of dog. So when you look into this creature's eyes, like it is assessing you and curious, and it's just wild. And that to me is another level. And I think that they are an apex predator and humans were an apex predator, and we found a way to collaborate and help each other, and that's where dogs came from. So that's the framework. Let's assume that that's true when I answer this question. I think dogs are companions. I don't think that they're food. I think it's a necessary collaboration in order for survival, evolution, or maybe like feasting versus famine. I think that's what that is. And then I think there's other animals that, especially the brain size compared to their body size, it's like herbivores don't really need as much intelligence, or maybe therefore sentience. And then the question that begs is there a difference between intelligence and sentience, or they correlate? I don't know the answer to that. It just popped into my head. But then whales would probably actually. I don't know how big a brain of a whale is. I was trying to think if there's an exception to that rule in the natural world where it's an herbivore but with an unusually large brain and therefore might be more self-aware.
So that's what makes something worthy of living, the size of their brain?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I don't know if sentience and an intellect correlate.
Wouldn't it be a capacity for suffering and pain?
But does that not correlate to neurons and central nervous system and brain?
Well, I mean, maybe there's a slight difference in how much they suffer, but to me, it's undoubted that both a dog and a cow can suffer immensely.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think most organisms could. I didn't even know with insects if that's true or not. But let's assume it is. I didn't know that they don't feel pain. That's news to me.
I don't know that for sure, but from what I understand, they don't have they don't have brains.
Yeah.
You know, so
they don't have brains either.
Not like an animal does.
For sure, but I just assumed it was smaller. I guess it shows you what I know. Like I'm thinking about a grasshopper, you know. That's so interesting. But yeah, I there's a lot of questions. Ultimately, I don't think you or I can answer. But the one that really stumps me, is like how do you measure the weight of a soul, or or how do you measure the sentience of an animal?
The easy answer is just to treat all animals with respect. How would you feel if? What do you feel about there's massive dog slaughterhouses and dog meat markets in Asia?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the most heartbreaking thing ever. You see these dogs stuffed in little cages and then they're killed just like we kill cows when they're young. They wait till they reach full size when they're a year or two old and then they kill them for the meat. So these are terrified children, puppies, just like the young pigs and all the animals we kill. How does that make you feel? Does that evoke emotion in you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd be concerned sitting across the table from you. You should be concerned if it didn't evoke some sort of emotion because I'm clearly a psychopath or a sociopath.
But so the way I see it is we've totally, this is a somewhat arbitrary cultural split where we get extremely emotional and traumatized about one animal suffering, but then we've conditioned ourselves to turn off our heart when it comes to these other animals. Yes, there might be some subtle differences in intelligence and sentience and by these certain metrics, but overall it's the same kind of deal.
Yeah, it is. However, I don't believe that any animal should be put in a cage. So I don't think a cow should be in a factory farm or harvested the way that's harvested. No. I think it should live a vastly different life. So I actually see more like crystallization with how I view all animals than dissonance. Now, there are some people who don't give a rat's ass, pun intended, about animals and
they
how
eat
they're
rat's
treated.
Ass.
Yeah, they probably do. They probably are a rat's ass. Probably look like one. But like I do think animals like dogs that are very intellectual and have this degree of cohabitating with humans and a long evolutionarily history of that, or history of that. I think they're probably more sentient than most creatures, I would imagine, and more so than a cow. But I'm not in the business of trying to make a hierarchy out of things. Again, I'm a minimalist. So in my mind, I'm just trying to harm the least amount of nature that I can through my diet and my lifestyle and where I choose to put my money and how I choose to live my life and my decisions. And so I don't condone what's going on in Asia with dogs. But I also know historically there's been times where people had to eat horses. And horses are another thing that you could argue is a companion. Yeah. And it's probably, even though brain's probably smaller than a wolf or a dog, they're still up there. And I don't think those people probably loved having to do that. And I hear horse meat doesn't taste that good. But times of survival, like you mentioned earlier, I think and that goes back to the whole natural world is survival. It is one big, long fight for survival. And we have this weird thing where we have the illusion of abundance. We have abundance in quantity, but not quality of food. And that's another crux of the issue that has to do with the system in the modern world is I don't believe that we could give people a high quality of food and feed everyone on plants alone without doing a lot more harm to the environment and without really harvesting a lot more souls unintentionally. But it sounds like maybe we don't agree on that. That part,
I don't think we could feed the world with pasture-raised meat either. The amount of deforestation that would take would be.
Well, I don't think it needs to be pasture raised. That's why regenerative agriculture is so different, and the amount of land it requires to feed a family for a full year is very feasible with the amount of hectares we have available. In fact, do you know who Joel Salatin is?
Yeah.
He actually, I only grew up 20 minutes north of his place.
Oh, really?
I had no idea who he was until I moved to Austin. But yeah, back in Virginia, he has, again, you made a couple good call outs. Anyone at home, look him up. He has a whole plan with the numbers and everything that shows how that's feasible. And so that gives me hope. Now, in terms of it being feasible, but the practicality or the probability that we'd actually do that in the modern state, I'm not hopeful, man.
Yeah.
Because you and I are fighting, even though we're hitting it from different perspectives, the same Goliath.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a few Goliaths, and they're ugly motherfuckers. And like I don't know that the world would ever get under the same banner for this kind of a solution. But that gives me hope, and it seems more possible than what you're proposing, which there's elements to it I really do enjoy and I've thought about long and hard about, but I just don't see it being plausible. I guess if I have to boil it down to a sentence.
Yeah, there's so much to discuss about that. And I do see, in a way, the animal-based folks and vegans, there are some things we can really align ourselves on and make a beneficial change for the world, and holding some of these institutions accountable. And to me, there's this terrible interplay between big pharma and the food industry where they want us to be sick and slow and tired, and then
docile,
get on their docile, dependent, easily brainwashed, and get on their pharmaceuticals and just be on this cycle of dependence and sickness. So we could come together on that. I don't think we'll see eye to eye on everything, but there are things we can work together on, like holding, there's the military industrial complex even plays a big role in all of this. But I wanted to address some of your other questions about Eden. So you were talking about, Eden, that might be the ideal, but we've fallen away from the ideal, so we shouldn't shoot for that. Now, Jesus taught us to pray to have our Father's will done on earth as it is in heaven. So we know that there is no slaughterhouses in heaven. There's no death and destruction.
We assume, like, hopefully. That would be terrible if we showed up there and there were.
Yeah, screaming bloody murder.
It's like, what is this place?
Yeah, so the Garden of Eden in Isaiah, the kingdom of heaven, it's peace and harmony. If a realm is of pure peace, then a soul can't be there that has malice or hate in its heart, right? You just wouldn't be a vibrational match. So I believe that's what heaven is like. Now, Jesus told us to pray on earth as it is in heaven. So Jesus wants heaven to come to earth, okay? They want these. So shouldn't we act accordingly? Jesus also taught us that the greatest commandment is to love God with all of our heart, our soul, and our might, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So when I think about these two things, and he told us to love the least of these, he said, you didn't love me when you didn't love the least of these. So I take these different passages together, and the Garden of Eden, the ideal, before humanity fell into sin and the devil became the god of this world, according to the Bible, right? According to the Bible, the devil is the god of this world. So in that system, yes, eating meat is commonplace. But if we want to bring about the kingdom, if we want to live in harmony with God's highest ideal, then to me, it has to start with our daily habits, with how we live and our outlook on life, and seeing these creatures as also being of God's creation, and working to improve plant agriculture to do less collateral damage and things like this. So to me, it all goes together. If we're really loving God with all of our heart, our soul, our might, then that involves making some sacrifices. It involves seeing these innocent creatures that have no voice, that live these horrific lives, and saying, you know what, I'm not going to participate in that, because that's not what God's highest ideal is. So that would be my rebuttal to what you said about that. And then regarding Jesus' sacrifice, Jesus cleansed the temple where they were doing these animal sacrifices for the remission of sins. Jesus said, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For if you had known what this means, you would have not condemned the innocent. So he was quoting back to Hosea, who was an anti-sacrifice prophet in the Old Testament. So the innocent are clearly the animals being sacrificed, right? So he storms the temple, frees the animal, flips the tables of the money changers. What were they changing money for? The selling of these animals that were going to be sacrificed. So he does that. He escapes the temple. That's when the priests say, we got to kill this dude. He's done. So all of this to me sounds like, and then you look at his connection with the Essenes, with John the Baptist, his brother being a vegetarian. His brother James, when he gave a decree at the Council of Jerusalem, they said, James, this is the leader of the church, selected by Jesus. He goes, what do we have to do to be Christians? How can a Gentile be a follower of Yeshua? And he gave 4 basically commandments. The first one is no sexual immorality, and the other 3 had to do with the treatment of animals. No blood, no strangulation, and no animal sacrifice to idols. So the most important things to being a Christian, according to the first leader of the Christian church, Jesus' blood brother James, 3 out of the 4 involve treating animals with compassion. Is that a coincidence? Is that interesting, you know?
Yeah.
And then you take in all of the early Christian church fathers, almost all of them believe that eating meat took you away from God, and many even said it was demonic. So St. John Chrysostom said basically that the saints refuse to eat animal flesh because it takes us away from God and it's of a demonic origin. Now, could you think of a more heretical statement for a revered church father to say if they thought that Jesus ate meat? That he would be calling Jesus a demon. That would be that he would be killed immediately, you know? So all of this evidence leads me to believe that the early Christian movement was a vegetarian movement, or at least considered compassionate animals an important issue. Did they eat fish occasionally? Maybe. But it was totally different than eating meat all day, every day, and supporting these brutal institutions that we have today.
Yeah, I agree with you on that and the difference. Like how you do something is almost more important than what you do.
Yeah.
And we're in agreement on that. And that's why I eat the way I eat and preach what I preach. And the temple thing, I didn't know a lot of that, to be honest. Again, because I haven't gone down the weeds with the biblical context with this. But I do think, though, there's a lot of metaphors in the Bible and not a lot of analogies. And although that one, church father said something very specific, I wonder if the animals in the temple were more of a metaphor than a literal thing, as a lot of the Bible actually is. And sometimes we get too caught into the literal. I mean, you procured other evidence, but that part specifically, I think sometimes we take things from that scripture too literally. But again, I'm with you. Like, I think we should strive for the best. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are imperfect, we will sin, and we have to ask for forgiveness. And it comes back to this old adage, just like, well, why don't you just do all the sins and then ask for forgiveness? Well, again, personally, I won't sleep well at night, and I like my life better, and I feel better, and I think the world is better when I do my best. But my best is not perfect. And so I guess perhaps that's what I'm saying here. Maybe that's what we're arguing, unfortunately, is like, which is the better or the lesser of two evils. I hate choosing a lesser of two evils. I would rather choose a way that I'm confident. This is why I don't vote. I've never voted.
Nice.
Because I just don't trust politicians, and I'm always picking the lesser of two evils.
You don't trust politicians? What are you, insane?
And that's how I feel with this diet, but I have to eat, because if I'm a being that's sentient, and the most important thing to me right now is my life, well, I have to eat something. And so I hate having to pick the lesser of two evils, but that's what it feels like, and it even felt like that when I was vegan and vegetarian and fruitarian for that matter, for the reasons we talked about. But yeah, I think that stuff's really fascinating. And I wish that I had more knowledge to give you some like good back and forth, but all I have to say is, like, pun intended, I'll chew on that. But I do think that it's, from a pragmatic perspective, it's just really hard pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, it is. And
because it's a bit difficult to do before you take into all the other things that we talked about here, and whether I'm right or you're right, or there's something in the middle. I think animals are going to get hurt either way.
But with one option, I believe we have an opportunity to move towards a system that can actually do the least amount of harm. Because a system where the end goal is killing an animal, there will always be the killing of animals. But a system where the goal is, the not killing of animals, we could eventually succeed at that with technology and our wisdom increasing. But it's been almost 2 hours. I think we
Has
should.
it been really?
Yeah,
I
it's
love it,
crazy.
dude.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I probably got a little redundant, but what a great
No,
talk.
it was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
really interesting. And I feel like we did something unique in
Yeah.
terms of having a friendly conversation about these deep issues, getting a bit into the spirituality. By the way, for the audience, some of the stuff I said about Jesus being vegetarian, it sounds extremely controversial. I get it. We do 3-hour deep dives on my podcast about this topic, about animal sacrifice, about the early Christian movement being predominantly vegetarian. So I don't expect you to believe anything I said here. This took me years of research, deep research and study to come to an understanding of, and it's very controversial. So if you want to check that out, check out the Jesus Way podcast on Aaron Abke's YouTube channel, and check out Christspiracy, a documentary by my friend Cam Waters. Chris, my friend, are there any comments, thoughts that you would like to end this podcast with?
I know a lot of people nowadays like to say extreme things to get attention and to make their position seem, or rather the opposition's position to seem untenable. I don't have a desire to do that. So I think my big takeaway from this conversation is like people need to really think about this, and they need to invest in what they think is right, both from a time perspective, a spiritual perspective, a financial perspective, and a choice perspective. Because I think if there's let's say the world is split 50-50 and everyone hears this podcast and 50% of people decide to side with me and you, I think the world's really better off.
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that people aren't having these conversations or asking themselves, like, what resonates with me? What do I think? Take action, and then you're going to pivot in the future. Be open, just like what we said at the beginning, full circle, right?
Yeah.
Take action, try to not cause unnecessary death.
Yes.
And when you take a life or something that you're doing to survive takes a life, have a reverence for it. Get connected with your food. And don't have closed-ended conversations or questions. And that's something you did a really great job today. And I appreciate that so much, because I think it's unfortunate. I think we'll see this change, but it's really unfortunate how loud the extremes and just general opposition to anything other than what you believe has become. And so, yeah, just honored to have this conversation. I hope it inspires people to really get into the weeds and commit to not causing unnecessarily, taking of life.
I love it. And you were a wonderful guest. I just thought of a really awesome way to end this. We could just maybe a few principles that we could both agree on. If you eat meat, maybe do your best and really make a commitment to not eat factory farmed meat anymore.
For sure.
That is, I think that's something we could agree on, and that's the least you could do. We all agree that factory farming is evil. The conditions these animals are kept in is, my goodness, we could do so much better than that.
It's a Holocaust on an animal level.
Yeah,
and
really is.
And it's sanctioned. And even if you're like, well, I can't afford well-raised meat. Well, that's not inherently expensive. That's the government's fault.
Yeah.
It's not that way. It's one of the cheapest and most nutrient-dense foods to have in a natural world.
Yeah.
But we've just come so far. And people forget, too, that they go to Whole Foods and they think they're buying 100% grass-fed. It's not. They pump it full. It's like they're fed grass in a machine factory environment. There's these trucks that fly down the aisle and just spit out grass. They have a terrible life as well, but they get to put the label on it. It doesn't matter whether it's Whole Foods or Sprout or anywhere. So you really need to know your rancher if you're going to eat meat. So again, I know that you're not for that, but the stipulation is if you do choose to do it, make sure you know how they're treated and what they're fed.
Right.
Because and everything in the Whole Foods as well is they add dyes and plastics, and there's just a lot of stuff that's not good for human health. And Lord knows what happened to the animal before it got there.
Right. Yeah. I just want people to move in the direction of more wisdom, more knowledge, more compassion. Just move in that direction. And if that means going from eating McDonald's every day or eating factory farm meat every day, try and transition to, regenerative beef or pasture raised.
Yeah.
If you are interested in the path that I lay out of vegetarianism or veganism, just take small steps and move in that direction. I actually don't recommend that people jump right in. I think it's a bad idea. It's a different gut microbiome that you need for a vegan diet and even a vegetarian. So what I did that worked well is I just gave up red meat first, did that for a while, then eventually gave up chicken, then I was pescatarian for a while, then eventually gave up the fish, did a lacto-ovo vegetarian for a while. Oh my goodness, we didn't even talk about my amazing
Oh
blood
my
labs.
gosh.
With 2 years without eating meat. We won't get into it today, but everything was beautiful
If
and
you want to do
optimal.
part 2 sometime,
Okay.
that would be really cool because there's so much nuances with blood work. It's almost its
Yeah.
own topic.
Yeah.
And I really want to get into it because I know your results were good. So I think it'd be very good for you and me
Yes.
because we're open to having a discussion. But yeah, it's like with what James told me, I don't know, I haven't seen the whole thing, but with what he told me, I'm very surprised based on what I know, which means it could be really like a really great discussion in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be super interesting. Yeah. I totally forgot about this, but I've got a secret. My blood work's really solid. And, you know, really, really high T. Everything was great. So
Yeah.
I was happy to see that. But what was I saying?
Steroids are amazing, dude.
Dude, the steroids are great. They're the best. Now, 100%
Plant-based steroids.
lifetime natty. The steroids I use are organic Tonkat Ali, the world's best herb for boosting testosterone.
I take Tongat Ali.
Now in Vitamin Shop.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah?
gotta get it. Yeah.
You have it.
Yes, our
Oh,
Tonkat
well.
Ali's in Vitamin. I
Hell
can't believe
yeah.
you haven't tried it, bro. It's the best.
I will.
It's the best.
Yeah.
One of the top rated ones on Amazon.
Really?
So there are these ways. And I wanted to say during this discussion,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the animal-based influencers are on.
Yeah, well, a lot of fitness and
True,
health
true.
influencers.
Very
But you're
true.
right. I'm not. And
Natty. See, there's
Yeah.
another thing we could agree on.
yeah, that's true. There's a lot of layers to this. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get to the blood work, and I take responsibility for that because
Son of a bitch.
I can be superfluous sometimes. But I like what you said with the principles, and so I don't know if that's where you want to end it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I bet you we could agree on like not eating processed foods.
Yes,
right? That's a general
100%.
principle
Yeah.
that like because like anything that has to do with plastic or a box or it's not good for people. It's not good for animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the environment in general. It's just like a terrible thing. What else would you say?
I would say fruit is great for both diets.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, the more organic fruit, the better. It's, you know, the energy from fruit is like nothing else. And it's designed to be eaten. It has seeds. You don't kill the organism when you eat it. And animal-based people and vegans can both agree that fruit is awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. There's a reason why fruitarian was my second best diet.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I was not expecting that.
So interesting.
And also eating, people like to demonize sugar and saturated fat, and both are necessary in my opinion. But speaking of blood work, fasting insulin, people think that the blood glucose and their fasting insulin being high is like linked to sugar consumption, and not when you eat fruit, not when you eat natural sugars in their natural form.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, and that's we can get into that if we do it another time.
It's a great
But,
point.
Yeah.
And I've found another principle, and I've seen people who have issues on a vegan diet. I've seen this a lot. It's where they mix sugar and fats together. And that's like, this principle goes against the sugar diet. All those guys, it's like, if you're eating sugar, just do sugar on its own. Because when you mix fat in, it confuses your body and causes a lot of problems with your blood sugar levels. And it, you know, energy crashes, fat accumulation. It could lead to diabetes and stuff. But if you just do straight sugar, you're going to be smooth sailing. Your metabolism gets ramped up. And I've had an amazing experience with that.
Yeah.
A lot of vegans who get skinny fat, they're just eating a lot of fat mixed with a lot of carbs.
And it's not a good type of fat. Typically, it's pretty
Yeah.
processed. It's hard to get a lot of fat if you're eating a whole foods vegan diet for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are on a whole foods vegan diet, I definitely recommend avocado or olive oil. Olive oil is my favorite.
Which you have to be careful with that too, because they cut it with canola oil and all these
Yes.
other things. So you really have to, again, like we talked about, there's so much. I wish it was not so difficult to do the right thing, whether it's my right thing or your right thing.
Yeah.
But in the modern world, you have to put like dedication to like a master's degree in understanding what you're doing with your everyday choices and your buying and your
crazy.
food. And that's unfortunate. And I think that's by design.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another like really great tip or principles. Like make sure you're getting high quality food, because I like to think about it from a health insurance perspective. I don't have health insurance. I haven't for 10 years. I haven't seen a doctor or a dentist in over a decade.
That's another principle. Don't go to the doctor.
My man. Yeah. I mean, well, think about it. If you pay up front, it's a long-term investment to your health to have the right lifestyle and eat healthy whole foods. If you're paying a lot insurance or you're eating shitty food, it's like you think you save money, but you actually have a worse health issues in the long run, you pay more money in the long run. So I see my grocery bill each week and putting the time into this as what preserves my quality of life and also keeps me from paying more money later on while I'm being ethical. So I think that's probably something we could agree on as well. Being proactive with your health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a foundation of my worldview.
Yeah. And maybe a principle between us two is just like eat real food.
Eat real food. Yes.
I guess that's the opposite of eating processed food. So that's somewhat redundant, but but it's like a good like lens. It's like, oh, it's not real food. It's processed. Like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
So it's an easy way to do it.
100%. And I was going to say, well, on a different note, you know, I think, and something I really respect about you beyond the nutrition is the positive attitude and the love you go about life with, and the just spreading good vibes. I think it's one of the best things you could do for your health is just to be a kind, loving individual to spread positivity to other people and to love yourself. There's nothing better for your health. And there were years in the past where I ate a clean organic diet, but I was struggling with health issues because my mind was tumultuous and I didn't really like myself all that much. And I think that could really cause disease just as much as a bad diet.
For sure, man. It's like a metaphorical, like a mental diet.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. And that's a great point too. And that has a whole thing that you can unpack. But I think if you like the people you spend the time around, you want to be like them and they make you the best version of you. If you're doing something you believe in, whether that's a work or a project, you have a sense of fulfillment and belonging. Those two things, I think, will help stabilize anybody who might have instability in their mental health. You and I have both been there. And that was probably more impactful than diet. If I had to, like, gun to my head, no pun intended, because I was considering suicide. I know it's a dark joke, but people can laugh because a lot of us have been there. I have to laugh about it. Gun to my head, I would say that mental health is almost more foundational than physiological health. They go hand in hand. They can affect one another. And I think spiritual health that's the trifecta, and they feed off one another. But people underestimate a processed mental diet as well.
Oh, it's going to be so deadly. And, you know, a lot of people talk about vegans or like, you know, I had the stereotypical view of vegans before I became one, but, you know, they're a little unstable and cruel and stuff. And I think there is that all across the board. There are people, and just because you have compassion for animals doesn't mean you have compassion for human beings too.
That's
like,
true.
I think
sometimes they change their hierarchy. And they're like, give animals grace and they won't give a single human grace.
Exactly. And I think that's the dark side of veganism, where they've lost their compassion for humans. And we could disagree with people and still love them and have compassion for them. But yeah, life is so much about your thoughts, and the thoughts that consume your mind are your consciousness, and your consciousness really creates your life.
Yeah.
It ties into your friendships and your business and everything. So this is the garden to tend to first and foremost, and everything else will spring from that.
The garden where the lion eats hay, because it's still
it's
still eating up there, baby.
It's still eating.
Well, we're trying to make it that way.
It's eating some grass-fed hay.
Oh, I meant Garden of Eden, not Eden. But
Garden of Eden.
It works
Garden
out.
of Eden.
Yeah, Garden of...
So those are some good principles. Anything else before we wrap up?
I've talked too much already. I just really appreciate this conversation and the nature of these conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For everyone listening, like, kudos, because there's a lot in there, but I think it's really great. I think you did a great job, so thanks for having me, man.
Thanks, man. I had a blast. You're a great friend. I'm stoked for your birthday. Everyone wish him a happy birthday, and check out his new book, which is launching in September.
Yes, sir.
Where can they find it?
So you can go to batesdates.com, but it'll be on Amazon. It's called The Dating Edge, 13 Principles to Stop Wasting Time and Find the Right Woman.
Awesome.
So oriented towards guys, but some of my best feedback has been from female test readers, whether they're single or in a relationship. So it's just a lot of stories and a lot of wisdom. And I had a lot of fun putting it together over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, check it out. His content about dating is awesome. Some of the best I've ever seen. So,
thanks, man.
And then I'm James Benefico. Check out my business, Organic Muscle. We make USDA organic workout supplements, Tonkat Ali to get that testosterone bumping. And we're also well known for our clean, healthy pre-workout that doesn't make you feel like you're going to have a heart attack. If you're interested in the spiritual side of things, I have the Jesus Way podcast with Aaron Abke, and we have amazing guests like Dr. James Tabor, best-selling authors, and we discuss the origins of Christianity before the Roman Empire and all of these dogmas got involved. What was the original faith? What was it all about? What was the original culture and traditions? And were the original Christians vegetarians? It's a deep question. So that's on Aaron Abke's YouTube channel. Chris, thank you so much. It's been an honor. And thank you to everyone who listened.